And here we are on the lecture on Chapter 18, um, Work in the Economy. Uh, we start off with Durkheim. Again, Durkheim had envisioned that many aspects of all the social institutions fitting together relied on a concept he called solidarity. He talked about mechanical solidarity. This was in simpler societies, often tribal societies. Everybody shared the same work and religion and viewpoints. And then he talked about organic society coming from a more complex society in which our tasks fit together. Um, there's a discussion of wage gap. I'm going to point that out to you as something that we'll probably have a test question on, but I'm not going to lecture on, just to see if you've read it. Now, there's a discussion about the agricultural revolution, and this is that going to the industrial revolution are key aspects of social development. In fact, actually, this is where we go from the small hunting and gathering bands to being located in a place and creating social structures, often more and more elaborate because of the agricultural revolution. We see groups engaging in something called bartering, trade. I've got wheat, you've got a chicken. How many things of wheat for a chicken? And then eventually the concept of money and abstract value, so you wouldn't have to carry big bushels of wheat or 30 chickens around with you. But of course, both economists and sociologists have pointed out that now that money has become this abstract, often it's become a socially abstract concept that has been used to put value over people. And we can discuss about whether we think that's a good idea. Then there's a discussion of mercantilism. The real key is in the Industrial Revolution, that's where anthropology, studying of society and culture, sort of hands off to sociology during the Industrial Revolution because the social institutions become much more complex during the Industrial Revolution. They have a much greater impact on people. As you read that section, very important, the Industrial Revolution. And we also get some new concepts that I call isms. So the first ism is capitalism, created by a guy named Adam Smith. And the idea is if I have control of this capital, value, money, whatever, a factory, then I'll become invested in making it better, and then I'll provide jobs and money for people, and that makes everybody better. And this is often where you hear things like the invisible hand of the economy, which Adam Smith really thought of as being God's interest in the economy. Kind of odd. And the concept of rising tide lifts all boats. The idea being the more dynamic an economy is, and the more competition. And Smith thought of government as only being involved in like basically maintaining the borders, and that competition would weed out all the ills of society, which of course he seemed to greatly miss how, in fact, actually, once you get to some economies of scale, what they tend to do is actually favor monopolies and oligopolies. So this idea of increasing competition doesn't work. And we see that, we'll take it something easy. There used to be something, ask your parents about it, called Netscape. And that's how most people, looked up things. And now, I almost did, now we Google things. The search engine that dominated that basically bought out and sidelined Netscape. They eventually had to pay the owner, Microsoft had to pay the folks from Netscape because their browser um, was made specifically to interfere with Netscape, causing them to lose ground. Um, the point is that instead of lots of different web browsers, which we actually had lots of different search engines way back in the day, and now we really just have a few. So it does seem to go to monopoly. Then the other ism is socialism. Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. This is where it's really more of an analysis. It's a historical analysis that says um, productive private property, a factory, a big farm, that being owned by one person means that person gets to exploit the workers who do all the work and create the wealth. So again, if I make a coat for $1 and I sell it for 10, the worker just gets paid the dollar. The capitalist keeps the 9. And that is a kind of exploitation that Marx felt was endemic in capitalism and that would eventually sow its own seeds of destruction, such that things like housing and education and healthcare and food should actually be handled by the government, providing at least the basis of those and concepts that Proudhon came up with, an early anarchist that said the private property is theft. And again, there he's not talking about your toothbrush as private property. He's talking about factories and big farms and stuff like that. But it does beg the question when people say, "Oh, but we can't do that. We can't provide housing and all this stuff for people." Other people look at the $880 billion that we spend in the military, just in the United States, and wonder what could we do with that money. Well, most economists agree that we could basically solve homelessness and hunger and provide education and still have a military for the amount of money that we spend on the military. So clearly, there is a choice there, and socialist countries talk about how they provide housing and education and transportation, healthcare for their citizens, and of course, capitalist countries like to point to, yeah, but we've got big screen TVs, and we have lots of cars, and we have all of these things that we can purchase in our capitalist economy. Sort of amusing that a lot of those things are actually made in China, socialist country. We'll let you go through that. Read Convergence Theory, again, on your own. Recession and Depression, go ahead and read those. Those seem to be fairly self-evident. Globalization. This is another one of those concepts that I think people at first were like actually fairly excited about. Globalization. Oh, we're going to trade all around the world. We're going to do things all around the world. And the concern has been that what's actually been garnered from the global assembly and commodity line is that labor in the first world is fired and moved to often the third world. And then the workers in the first world don't have any or fewer job opportunities, particularly in like industrialization and manufacturing and those things, as more and more of those jobs are done elsewhere. And Marx has pointed out, well, how long can we sustain that before there's not enough people buying things to create the demand that products made in Singapore, Malaysia, China have a place to go. There's also a concept of xenophobia, fear and hatred of foreigners. I think we're starting to see definitely an element of that in American culture, where over the past 10 years, immigrants, particularly from Mexico, have been villainized, quote unquote taking jobs from people, though most of the people I know can't point to somebody from Mexico coming and taking their job at Dell or any place. Most of the time, these folks are doing jobs that Americans don't want to do, particularly like agricultural sector jobs. Anyway, that is chapter 18. Also look at the issue of automation and robots in the workplace. And, how do you feel about that? As many of us no longer aspire or think that we're going to work in the industrial sector. Most of us don't have a hard opinion about that. Automation, we're like, oh, sure, robots can make cars or whatever. I don't care. But remember, the next step is AI. And that's automation of the kind of mental tasks that often people with college degrees do. And so what will happen to us as a country, as a nation, as a group, if all of those tasks are being done with AI and more people are relegated to partial employment, gig economy, part-time work? What does that do for us? And again, remember, work is part of that social institution, right? Like education, the family, religion, politics. If that shows weakness, it destabilizes other parts. It can be said that a lot of the anger that people have felt about the declining availability of good jobs and people that say, hey, wow, I worked my whole life and I don't have anything to show for it. And that anger was something that politicians clearly have tapped into. And so one system is clearly related to another. And that is chapter 18.